starting off with the Colts, I gave them a B, just a solid B, with your key additions being AD Mitchell, Sam Ibukam, and Leatu Latu. So 2 highly touted draft picks, and then an edge rusher to fill out your team. And then your key losses, you really have any. So I gave you a B over some of the guys who get a C in some of our other past. So who was it exactly? It was our Patriots. So Patriots filled in a lot of their holes with draft capital, and the key losses was really small. The thing is with the Colts, you didn't have any losses, and you brought back a ton of guys. You re-signed your Kenny Moore and your Grover Stewart, and you brought those guys back in. You know, your Michael Pittman, you brought him back in, and you added to a couple of the rooms that needed to be added to. Like, your edge rusher room is now really, really, really good, and your wide receiver room looks a lot better. I like Alec Pierce as a wide receiver, but AD Mitchell is going to eventually take over that deep threat role. So the Colts, I think, did a little bit better than that C, even a C+. So I gave him a solid B.
Yeah, I gave him an A-,
Okay.
because I really, really like the Michael Pittman, AD Mitchell stack. I love the idea of that. I like the fact that they made the right call and took Latu as the first, big-time defensive guy off of the board there. And to then go get AD Mitchell, who we talked about, we saw him mocked as high as a few picks later than that. We saw him mocked. This is what I really like about their draft is we saw AD Mitchell mocked to them at that pick that they took Latu at. They get Latu and then they get AD Mitchell anyway. They did a lot of things to help. I'm actually going to change my mind. I'm going to knock him down to a B+, because what if Anthony Richardson gets hurt again? What's the plan there? Now,
yeah,
Gardner Minshew outperformed his contract last year, so he was always going to get a little bit more money. But we haven't seen anything on paper that shows us Anthony Richardson's going to stay healthy. He didn't just suffer one injury, if you guys remember. He kept getting hurt over and over and over. Was missing, coming out of the games, and so yeah, their team got better. Their quarterback room just still has a little bit of a question mark on it. So I'm gonna go B+ on this one.
Yeah, definitely. You want to go ahead and take the reins on the Jacksonville Jaguars?
You know what's funny about the Jacksonville Jaguars is that I'm interested to see what they're gonna do with their quarterback situation. I saw that they were talking 5 years, $212 million, and I'm just like, my problem is, and I may be living in 49er la la land. I'm perfectly understandable to this idea. But if we put Brock Purdy and if we put Trevor Lawrence up to all 32 teams in the NFL, how many of them are taking Trevor Lawrence over Brock Purdy based off of what they're going to do this season?
Yeah, right.
And I just wonder, 5 years, $212 million, that's just, but you know what? They haven't signed up that extension yet, so that doesn't factor into my grade. They still only get a C for me. How do we feel about Gabe Davis, right? He's a player who was on the other side of a great player. So is he going to be able to stand alone? Is he going to be better than Calvin Ridley was? You sign Eric Armstead to a big time contract, a guy that hasn't been able to stay healthy, and he doesn't rack up a lot of sacks. And honestly, you lose Darius Williams. So it's just one of those things where, to me, C+, that's where they live.
Yeah.
This team didn't get better to me. There's a lot of weirdness in the NFL this offseason when you go back and look at a lot of teams just kind of stayed where they were at. They didn't really make any impact moves. There weren't a lot of teams that got a lot better. And I think that has a lot to do with when you look at the upper echelon of the NFL right now, those teams are not who's the best team that's running out of time? There's not a ton of them. Chiefs are there to stay. The Texans are on the rise. The Cowboys and the 49ers both have younger quarterbacks and younger cores that are Micah and Nick aren't going anywhere.
Right.
It's just maybe a lot of these teams are just looking and thinking okay, it's the top of the NFL that isn't going anywhere, so we're not going to make all these moves. But then look at the Texans. They put all their chips onto the, whatever that analogy is. They push their chips in, they went all in, and look at them. is anyone going to be surprised if they're playing the Chiefs in the conference finals next year? Like, will that surprise
Right.
anyone? I don't think so.
Right. No, absolutely. Yeah, and what's weird too is so I gave him a B minus, and so I'm like kind of right
You're
there
so
with you.
nice.
You lose Calvin Ridley, and then you're attempting to replace him with a combination of Gabe Davis and Brian Thomas Jr., and you lose Darius Williams, and then you're attempting to replace him with a combination of a Darnell Savage, Ronald Darby combination. But you also add to the offensive line that needed a little bit more help outside of the tackles, which there's question marks about who you're going to sign, who's going to stay. Ezra Cleveland and Mitch Morris got brought in for the offensive line, and then Eric Armstead does make a defensive line better and can help out a guy like Trayvon Walker, who ended up having a pretty decent last season, and hopefully help him out a little bit more to progress to the player that he is supposed to be, that number one overall pick a couple of years ago. So again, they lost two big pieces, and they lose two guys, and they're taking like four guys to replace the two. So I kind of called some of it a wash. Like, I don't mind. I'm not the biggest Calvin Ridley fan. I don't think he's going to be super duper successful going forward. But Gabe Davis and Brian Thomas Jr. replacing him, I think, is okay. Darius Williams is the one where I have a little bit more issue with, because he's very talented, and Darnell Savage and Ronald Darby are not going to be able to give the same production that Darius did. So a B minus is where I put him. Again, with the offensive line additions that you made, Eric Armstead addition as well, mentoring a Trayvon Walker, B minus is where I want to sit for him. The Houston Texans, ton of moves. I gave them an A minus. Key additions: Joe Mixon, Stephon Diggs, Daniil Hunter, Danico Autry, Aziz Al-Shaair, Tim Settle, Kamari Lassiter, Blake Fisher, and Cade Stover, a couple of rookies, again, who I think are going to make an immediate impact. And then key losses: Scott Quessenberry, Jonathan Grenard, which again you replace with then Daniil Hunter, and then Malik Collins as well. So only a couple of losses really, and you kind of load up on a lot of talent on that team. I just wasn't, I'm not sure. I was a lot bigger fan of the Stephon Diggs thing when you had him for a little bit longer time, instead of like kind of just shoehorning like all of the money into like the year, so then you could potentially cut him after that. I'm not 100% on where we're kind of sitting with that one. So an A minus is where I want to sit with them. A lot of really good additions. We're going to make an immediate impact to this team that, like you said, might end up making a AFC conference championship game.
Yeah, I love the Daniil Hunter. Obviously, I love Aziz Al-Shaair. No surprise there.
Right.
And honestly, everybody wanted to give the Cincinnati Bengals a freaking award for signing Zach Moss. I love trading for Joe Mixon. I love Joe Mixon. That dude is nothing but production. And, you know, the Cincinnati Bengals fans will be like, our offensive line sucks. Protect Joe Burrow. We have the worst offensive line in the history of the NFL. Then be like, oh, Joe Mixon only gets 2 yards a carry. Well, duh, those things go hand in hand. Like, how does that make sense? You're gonna criticize your offensive line and then run Joe Mixon out of town. I mean, honestly, the Houston Texans, I'm shocked that this is an A minus, considering you freaking love what the Steelers did. But whatever, I'm not here to debate two of your draft grades. But I gave it a minus as well. You know, they took my boy with their first pick, Lassiter, and I really like that. And they picked up a tight end later in the draft, which they need. And it's just one of those things where I think that they added important, massive, like, impact pieces, like Daniil Hunter, impact piece, Stephon Diggs, impact piece.
Yep.
And I actually disagree with you. I like the fact that they're not attached to Stephon Diggs longer than they need to be. I think you give that rookie, they're not all rookies, obviously, you give that young group of wide receivers room to grow. And the one thing that I think the Houston Texans are showing here is, like, they're not afraid to make a swing. So if they got to, now this is a lot of this team comes from the 49ers and Rams, who've pretty much made the mid-season trade famous the past couple of years. And I just like the Texans have shown that they're going to go for it if they think that, you know, there's a chance to get better. I think Houston Texans, out of like all the teams in the NFL right now, it's got to be an exciting, very, very like exciting start to the season for the Houston Texans. Like, you
Yeah,
have to be
definitely.
so stoked for your team.
Yep.
And I think they might start seeing some market share, some market growth in the Texas area in terms of the more popular team to root for down there, because it's just they right. They're growing, they're getting better, and they don't have a babbling idiot for an owner.
Yeah, I
Are
think
you excited about the 10-part Netflix documentary on Jerry Jones's life?
Yeah, I saw that. It's gonna be
I don't know
interesting.
how you're going to do 10 parts on his life. Maybe they're hoping he's going to die before it's over, so
I
they
know.
could finish it all out.
It's funny the stark contrast of all the stuff, CJ Stroud and Micah Parsons really just hanging out the entire offseason. It feels like every single day. And the contrast of Cowboys fans in the comment sections of those videos and the Texans fans like thinking it's funny and fun, and then the Cowboys fans being like, he needs to get back to work, like we need to do all this work, and and I'm just like, Jesus Christ, dude, like nobody can have any fucking fun around here. That's why everyone hates us. It's Jesus Christ. Yeah, so it's pretty interesting. Moving on to the Tennessee Titans. Do you want to take this one, or do you want me to take this?
No, I'll take this one. This is a B plus for me. I did knock the Tennessee Titans down a little bit for Mike Vrabel. I think he's a hell of a coach. I did not agree with what they did there, but I think that maybe their hand might have been a little bit tipped based off of the fact that Vrabel may not have liked the way that the front office structure was going, and I think he kind of like pushed his way out. Their draft was interesting. I know there's a lot of players on their draft that you and I were high on, namely Tavondre Sweat, but JC Latham at 7 is freaking wild. But then you go ahead and and I think you and I could both agree the Calvin Ridley thing is that there's a big ass question mark on the back of Calvin Ridley, but I love L'Jarius Sneed, obviously Tony Pollard. Interesting running back to fill in for Derrick Henry. Losing Azeez Al-Shire sucks, but I mean, how important are middle linebackers in the NFL today anyway? So it's a B plus for me. If they had kept their head coach, I might have been a little bit higher on this. This is mostly the L'Jarius Sneed thing. Is just, you and I were talking about how I thought he was going for a first round pick, and he obviously didn't. But you trade for him, you sign him, and frankly, that dude's a hell of a corner. I don't care what anyone says. Like, I watched that dude.
Yep.
The 49ers are talking about, let's get rid of Deebo Samuel because that he can't get open against man-on-man coverage because, he's the reason we lost the Super Bowl and all this shit. And he shut Deebo down in the Super Bowl. So I really like what Tennessee Titans did. Unfortunately, their outlook on the season, you still got a massive unknown at quarterback. So we'll see what their ultimate season looks like. But you weren't going to make a change at quarterback this early anyway. So it's a B plus for me.
Yeah, I give it a B, and I think what I like the most is they're surrounding Will Levis, which is with as much as possible.
Sure.
Losing Derrick Henry, gaining Tony Pollard, that's still a step down, in my opinion. Tony did not do well when he was the full-time starter. You can go look at the numbers and go look how he did. You could just go look at the film. His vision was strange and muddled in a lot of situations, and I wasn't sure what he was kind of doing. Calvin Ridley, great addition, but overpaid. I like Tyler Boyd being added as well. JC Latham taken a little bit too high. Like the player, but just too high taken. Lloyd Cushenberry is a great addition at center while losing Aaron Brewer. So you replace him with a better player. Chidobe Awuzie and L'Jarius Sneed. Your entire secondary gets an immediate boost. You have one of the better secondaries in the league already with that huge boost. So a little bit worse at running back, better at wide receiver. I think your offensive tackle is a little bit worse because you lose Andre Dillard. But center, better. Linebacker, a little bit worse because of Azeez losing him. But then corner room just immediately boost up. So I give it a B, but again, I like that they're trying to give Will Levis as much chances as possible, boosting up the offense with the line and the weapons around him. So, and I'm a believer of Will Levis. I hope he does well next year because I don't have any hard feelings against the Titans because I don't really see him as a threat, and I don't think a lot of people do. So if they can go out swinging, I think it could be exciting.
Yeah, it's so funny how you look at certain teams. Like, I hope the Houston Texans kill it. because we
Right.
don't got to worry about them at all. Like,
Right.
destroy it. Like, if y'all make it to the Super Bowl, we're in the same Super Bowl, I'll start hating that week. But besides
Right.
that, like, I hope the Texans kill it.
Yeah. No, I mean, and my favorite team from Texas, and I'm like, hey, Houston, like tear it up, dude. That's crazy. Good for him,
Yeah.
you know. So yeah, I'm in the same